America in the 1850s, a land of vast potential and stark contrasts, a young nation full of promise but deeply divided. The North and South, two regions with distinct cultures, economies, and ideologies, were on a collision course. In the North, factories churned out goods fueled by industry and abolitionist ideals. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, bringing with it a wave of innovation and a growing middle class. The North was a land of progress, where the fight against slavery was gaining momentum. In the South, vast plantations dependent on enslaved labor clung to a way of life that was becoming increasingly untenable. The economy was heavily reliant on cotton, and the wealth of the region was built on the backs of enslaved people. The Southern way of life was deeply rooted in tradition and resistant to change. At the heart of this divide slavery, a moral stain on the fabric of the nation. The abolitionist movement in the North viewed slavery as a profound injustice, while the South saw it as essential to their economic survival. This fundamental disagreement was tearing the country apart. Abraham Lincoln, a man of humble origins and unwavering principles, emerged on the political stage. His eloquence and dedication to the cause of freedom made him a beacon of hope for many. Lincoln's rise to prominence was a turning point in American history. His election in 1860, a victory for anti-slavery sentiment, ignited the South's fears. The Southern states saw Lincoln's presidency as a direct threat to their way of life and their economic interests. The election of Lincoln was the final straw for many in the South. Secession, once unthinkable, became a terrifying reality. Southern states began to break away from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. This act of defiance set the stage for a conflict that would determine the future of the nation. The issue of states' rights versus federal authority reached a fever pitch. The South argued for their right to govern themselves and maintain their way of life, while the North believed in a strong, united nation under a central government. This ideological battle was at the core of the impending conflict. Could a nation half slave, half free, truly stand? The question loomed large over the country, casting a shadow over its future. The tensions were palpable, and the nation was on the brink of a monumental change. The answer was a resounding no. The divisions were too deep, the differences too great. The nation was headed for a confrontation that would reshape its very identity. The nation braced itself for a storm that would engulf the land in a tide of blood and brother fighting brother. The Civil War was on the horizon, a conflict that would test the very soul of America and determine the fate of its people. April 12, 1861. The first shots of the Civil War thundered across Charleston Harbor, marking the beginning of a conflict that would forever change the United States. The echoes of cannon fire reverberated through the air, signaling the start of a war that would pit brother against brother and tear the nation apart. Fort Sumter, a lonely bastion of Union loyalty in the heart of secessionist South Carolina, came under Confederate bombardment. The fort, manned by a small garrison of Union soldiers, was ill-prepared for the ferocity of the attack. Shells rained down relentlessly, and the defenders could do little but hold on and hope for reinforcements that would never come. The attack was brief, brutal, and decisive. Within 34 hours, the fort was reduced to rubble, and the Union garrison was forced to surrender. The Confederate victory at Fort Sumter was a powerful statement, emboldening the South and setting the stage for a long and bloody conflict. News of the attack spread like wildfire, igniting a nation. Newspapers across the country carried the story, and the telegraph wires buzzed with the latest updates. In towns and cities, people gathered to read the headlines and discuss the implications of this sudden and shocking event. In the North, outrage and calls for action. Citizens demanded a response, and the government quickly moved to mobilize its forces. Volunteers flocked to recruitment centers, eager to defend the Union and restore order. The sense of urgency was palpable, and the North prepared for a war that many believed would be over in a matter of months. In the South, defiance and a rush to arms. The Confederate States, buoyed by their victory at Fort Sumter, rallied their own forces. Men from all walks of life enlisted, driven by a fierce sense of independence and a desire to protect their way of life. The South was ready to fight, and they believed they could secure their freedom through force of arms. The die was cast. A nation once united was now locked in a fight for its very survival. The lines were drawn, and both sides prepared for a conflict that would test their resolve and reshape the future of the United States. The war would be long, hard, and costly, but neither side was willing to back down.
Lincoln rallied the North, issuing a call for 75,000 volunteers. His words inspired many, and the response was overwhelming. Men from all over the North answered the call, ready to fight for the preservation of the Union and the principles it stood for. Young men, some barely old enough to shave, flocked to enlist, their heads filled with dreams of glory and a swift victory. They believed they were embarking on a grand adventure, but the reality of war would soon shatter their illusions. The battles ahead would be brutal, and the cost in human lives would be staggering. They would soon learn the brutal truth of war. The fields of battle would be stained with blood, and the horrors of combat would leave scars that would last a lifetime. The Civil War was a crucible, forging a new nation through fire and sacrifice.
From the rolling hills of Manassas to the blood-soaked fields of Antietam, the Civil War raged. These battlefields, now serene and silent, once echoed with the sounds of war. The clash of steel, the thunder of cannons, and the cries of the wounded filled the air, painting a grim picture of the brutal conflict that tore a nation apart. Battles, once formal affairs fought in neat lines, descended into brutal, chaotic clashes. The orderly ranks of soldiers quickly dissolved into a maelstrom of violence and confusion. Men fought hand to hand, often unable to see their enemies through the smoke and chaos. The battlefield became a nightmarish landscape where survival was uncertain, and death was a constant companion. The roar of cannon fire, the rattle of musketry, the screams of the wounded. This was the symphony of war. Each battle was a cacophony of destruction, a relentless barrage of sound and fury that left soldiers deafened and disoriented. The ground shook with the impact of artillery, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Amidst this chaos, soldiers struggled to maintain their composure and follow orders. For the common soldier, life was a grim cycle of boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. When not engaged in battle, soldiers endured long periods of inactivity, waiting for the next engagement. They spent their days in makeshift camps, trying to find comfort in the harsh conditions. The anticipation of battle weighed heavily on their minds, knowing that at any moment, they could be called to face the horrors of war once again. Hunger, disease, and exposure were constant companions. Soldiers often went without adequate food and clean water, leading to malnutrition and dehydration. The unsanitary conditions of the camps bred disease, and many soldiers succumbed to illnesses such as dysentery, typhoid, and pneumonia. Exposure to the elements added to their suffering as they faced scorching heat, freezing cold, and relentless rain without proper shelter. Yet amidst the carnage, there were acts of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Soldiers risked their lives to save wounded comrades, often under heavy fire. These moments of heroism provided a glimmer of humanity in the midst of the brutality. Stories of bravery and selflessness spread through the ranks, inspiring others to act with similar valor. These acts of courage became a testament to the resilience and spirit of the soldiers. Brother fought brother in this tragic conflict. The Civil War tore families apart, pitting relatives against each other on the battlefield. Fathers, sons, and brothers found themselves on opposite sides, driven by their beliefs and loyalties. The personal toll of the war was immense, as families were divided and relationships were shattered. The emotional scars of this fratricidal war would linger long after the last shot was fired. The human cost was staggering. The Civil War claimed the lives of over 600,000 soldiers, leaving countless families in mourning. The physical and emotional toll on the survivors was profound, as they grappled with the loss of comrades and the horrors they had witnessed. The war left a lasting impact on the nation, reshaping its future and leaving a legacy of sacrifice and sorrow.
At Shiloh, the ground ran red with the blood of over 23,000 casualties. The battle was a brutal and bloody confrontation, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The sheer scale of the carnage shocked the nation and underscored the devastating reality of the war. The aftermath of Shiloh was a grim reminder of the high price of conflict. Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history, left over 22,000 dead, wounded, or missing. The battle's ferocity and the staggering number of casualties highlighted the war's brutal nature. The fields of Antietam became a symbol of the immense human cost of the Civil War, a somber reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of a nation's ideals.
The Civil War was not confined to distant battlefields. Its impact reverberated through every town and village, north and south. On the home front, women took on new roles, running farms, businesses, and tending to the wounded. In the South, the war brought hardship and deprivation. Blockades choked off supplies and the Confederacy struggled to maintain its war effort. In the North, industry boomed, producing weapons and supplies for the Union Army. For enslaved African Americans in the South, the war represented a glimmer of hope.
The Underground Railroad, a network of safe houses and secret routes, became a lifeline to freedom. Thousands escaped to the North, risking everything for a chance at a better life.
Section 5. A New Birth of Freedom. The Emancipation Proclamation, January 1, 1863. With the stroke of a pen, Abraham Lincoln forever changed the course of the war. The Emancipation Proclamation, a document of immense moral and strategic importance, declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. The proclamation was not simply a moral imperative, it was a shrewd military maneuver. By enlisting African Americans into the Union Army, Lincoln struck a blow at the heart of the Confederacy. The Emancipation Proclamation transformed the war from a struggle to preserve the Union into a fight for human freedom. It gave hope to millions and ensured that the legacy of the Civil War would be forever intertwined with the fight for equality. Section 6. High Tide at Gettysburg, the turning point of the war. July 1st to 3rd, 1863. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. A small town thrust into the center of history. For 3 long, hot days, Union and Confederate armies clashed in a battle that would decide the fate of the nation. Pickett's charge, a desperate but futile Confederate assault on the Union Center, marked the high water mark of the Confederacy. The failure of this attack sealed the South's fate. Gettysburg, a victory bought at a terrible price, marked a turning point in the war. The Confederacy, bled white and demoralized, would never again threaten the North. Section 7. Victory and Loss, the South in Ruins, the North in Reconstruction. The war dragged on for 2 more years, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Weakened and exhausted, the Confederacy finally crumbled. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. The war was over, but the nation lay in ruins. The South, its economy shattered and its social order in tatters, faced the daunting task of rebuilding. Reconstruction, a period of profound social and political change, began.
The war had taken everything from us. Our homes, our families, our way of life. Now, we had to pick up the pieces and start anew.
Section 8. Scars of Freedom, the enduring legacy of the Civil War. The Civil War left an indelible mark on the American psyche. It was a war that tested the very soul of a nation. A war that forced Americans to confront the evils of slavery and the meaning of freedom. The war led to the abolition of slavery, the preservation of the Union, and the expansion of federal power. It also left a legacy of bitterness and division that continues to resonate today. Section 9. Conclusion: a nation forged in fire. The American Civil War was a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Yet from the ashes of this conflict, a new nation emerged. A nation forever changed by the sacrifices of those who fought and died on its battlefields. The Civil War reminds us that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. It is a story that continues to resonate today, a story that teaches us about the fragility of democracy, the importance of unity, and the enduring power of hope.